H.G. Wells was the originator of all this stuff. He was just an English hack writer, but he came up with this idea of invading the world from outer space, and it caught on. It's been going ever since because it's inexhaustible. You know, there's a billion planets out there, and they're all going to invade us at some time or another. So.
But see, Eustace, here's the interesting thing. They've got people out there like David Icke, like Jordan Maxwell, like what's his other guy's name? They all mix up a little bit of this truth. Some of it's true what they say, and then they sprinkle in, well, but much of our DNA is alien, and so in other words, they try to marry truth with absolute foolishness.
Oh yeah, it's very foolish, and it's really. I know all these people, and they've been ludicrous to me ever since I've known them. But they keep getting away with this crap. It's incredible.
Well, isn't that why? Look, to play a website, for example, Jeff Rense puts out a lot of important information, but then in the next article you read on his website, he'll talk about taking a vacation to Mars, or how you know the dark side of the moon has a city on it, and so on his website is this powerful truth mixed with this absolute nonsense, and you say to yourself, anybody who's new to this who would read it would think that we're all crazy.
Oh, yes, because there is absolutely no evidence for any of this. It's just a fantasy, sheer fantasy, and they deluge people with it until they begin to, I guess it all started with Buck Rogers in 1936.
But why are they marrying facts about 9/11 with it? They're marrying facts about the conspiracy of the Jewish supremacy and the Zionists with it. In other words, they're putting in truth with this nonsense. I think it's specifically to make us all look like we're crazy.
Well, and to believe crazy things, because when you start believing crazy things, you'll believe anything. And the idea of evidence or proof just vanished into thin air. It's no longer required anywhere.
Well, I've had people actually write to me on my email arguing with me that the world is flat. And that can you imagine this stuff? And I tell you something, you know, when you get stuff like this, and the people, I'm convinced some of these people believe this nonsense, one wonders how far down we have sunk as humans when masses of people are so dumbed down, Eustace. You talked about it in other shows we've done together. What have they done to make us all dumb as fence posts?
Well, they locked up the only intelligent man in the United States, who was Ezra Pound, and they put him in an insane asylum. And then they let everybody know that if you talk any sense to anybody, then we're going to put you in the insane asylum. In fact, J. Edgar Hoover issued orders in 1959 that I be committed to a mental institution. And of course everybody ignored him because he had no such power.
Well, how about the use of drugs and chemicals in our water and the rest of it?
Oh, that's omnipresent. They use that all the time. In fact, the godfather of modern military science was James, the president of Harvard. James, I've written about him in my book, and he became Gauleiter of Germany after we invaded Germany.
Now, he knew about what, using chemicals to control mass population?
He was a chemist. He is the one who was commissioned by Winston Churchill in 1942 to put together an anthrax bomb which would exterminate everybody in Europe. And that was his job, and he did it. But who
are those two Jewish brothers at the Rockefeller Institute in New York that designed a lot of stuff? They came in after this polio vaccine, and they were instrumental in getting a lot of grant money to do research on mass population elimination and stuff. Two brothers, I forget their name.
There were three Jewish brothers. I can't think of the names at the moment, but they were employees of Rockefeller.
Yes,
one of them was
right.
The head of the Rockefeller Institute of Medical Research, and the other two helped revolutionize the medical care industry in the United States.
That's right, and they were instrumental also in saying, suppressing evidence that fluoride in water was poison, and instead of doing regular science on that stuff, they used junk science to say that it was good for teeth, didn't they?
Oh, yes. They said it would absolutely eliminate cavities. And, of course, every parents of children, as the children get to adolescence, they all have cavities. And so these people came along and said, we'll relieve mankind of this problem forever. That was the promise that they held out. And, of course, it was totally useless. And there was never, to this day, I quoted one congressman in my book, Murder by Injection. He looked into it, and they found that there was no evidence for any of this stuff. So he went after him. The next thing, he was a congressman from Kansas, and the next thing you know, he was out of Congress.
He was a civilian looking for a job. Well, well, they don't end at the fluoride either, do they? I mean, look what they're doing with these other drugs.
Well, they're doing it. They've got so many that you can't keep up with them. They're working all the time. The Rockefeller Group. I joked years ago that all of the drugs that the Rockefeller Group was producing were based on petroleum, and I said the human system was never intended to run on petroleum.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's interesting that Prozac, I believe, and maybe somebody out in the listening audience can correct me if I'm wrong, has a base of several chemicals, one of them including formaldehyde, and also there is some fluoride in there as a stabilizing agent inside of Prozac, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, they've got those stabilizers and everything. It's usually mercury or it's a derivative. And that's what really does the damage, because when you get mercury into the system, you can't get it out.
Yeah. So basically, they've given us a cocktail of lies in our press and in our entertainment. They've dumbed us down with drugs and chemicals. They've fattened us up with hormones and hormone-laced milk. They've destroyed our immune system with antibiotics in the beef supply by giving it to beef cattle and to cows. And basically, so we're just sitting ducks for the end here, it seems like.
Oh, we are, because the American Medical Association, you know, I went to the Library of Congress in 1950 to look up whatever historical research there was on the American Medical Association. I found out that the Library of Congress had none. That's why I wrote my book, Murder by Injection, because all these years that the AMA had been the most powerful lobby in Washington, there was never any book written about them. They operated in total secrecy.
And how much control does the AMA have from Zionism and Zionist control?
Well, Fishbein was the head of it for many years. You know, he ran the whole show, Morris Fishbein, and he himself had no medical training. He was strictly a Jewish entrepreneur that did it all with chutzpah. He went to medical school in Chicago briefly, and they flunked him out. And the rest of his life, he spent pretending to be posing as a doctor.
Wow.
And he became head of the AMA, and he ran it as a one-man dictatorship.
Well, you know, it's interesting, Eustace, when you get outside the United States, you start understanding that, well, here in France, for example, if you go to a pharmacy, most of the choices you have are between homeopathic cures that are natural-based, whether it be herbs or whatever, and they have a whole section of it. And they also have cures that are more Western-based medicine, but the doctors here are trained to use both. And it's amazing that in America, it's usually the most up-to-date poison that they find.
The latest thing, also the production lines.
Yeah.
And they're like carnival barkers, because everything they put out, they say it cures everything.
Yeah. Well, and the other side of it is, you know, that they're getting people on these cholesterol drugs, and I just read this article about there's no evidence that cholesterol is behind all this heart disease and stuff.
Oh, absolutely not. Most of the heart disease started with the after World War I, when the war ended, and they no longer had any market for it. The manufacturers were stuck with tons of chlorine, and they finally put it in the drinking water. They claimed it would purify the drinking water. Of course, that's when everybody started having a heart attack. Men started falling over like crazy in 1920 with heart attacks, and they couldn't figure out.
From chlorine.
Yeah, from chlorine. Well, chlorine is a very dangerous poison. You shouldn't use any chlorine on your house at all. It's used generally as a disinfectant. They use it in all the hospitals, of course. And some of the chlorine derivatives that they're using in the hospitals have been proven to be very dangerous and have been banned.
Well, and you know as well as I do that I've turned the tap on in some cities in America. I'll give you a good example. In New York City or even in San Francisco and Los Angeles, you can smell chlorine coming out of the tap.
Oh, yes. It's everywhere. Because they use it for everything, an all-purpose medication.